Hi, I'm Jason, and welcome back to Community Design Review, where we look at some of the best custom cards from the Custom Magic subreddit as voted on by you, the community. First up, we have a shoutout for the week, Yojimbo, the Blade of Vengeance. He costs 2 red for a 0/6 legendary creature Spirit Warrior. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token, sacrifice X treasure tokens, Yojimbo gets +X+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Now, as someone who is infinitely familiar with the Final Fantasy games, I really appreciate the flavor of this design. /S. I will say mechanically, the first ability feels a lot more black, getting a trigger when something dies, rather than red. Creating treasure tokens is red in general, but seeing as black can also make treasure tokens, it makes more sense for this to be a black ability in my mind. The second ability definitely feels red though. I will say I'm curious, are you able to sacrifice 0 treasure tokens in order to give this just first strike until end of turn? If so, they might as well just have first strike innately, but if not, I think it's totally fine. There are a lot of cards that say X can't be 0, and this doesn't say that, so it leads me to believe that it could be 0, but I'm not 100% sure. Either way, seems like a cool design, and I'm sure there are people who appreciate it a lot more than I do. Next up, we have a few meme cards for the week, starting with Memnite with a gun. Memnite with a gun is a 0-cost 2/1 legendary artifact creature with no creature type and no abilities. But he does have the awesome flavor text, "What sins will he commit?" Now, we all know that a classic Memnite and Ornithopter just bounce off of each other because of their stats. However, a Memnite with a gun can easily overpower an Ornithopter. That's why you need an Ornithopter with a bulletproof vest. This way, the creatures still can't kill each other. They will just eternally be locked in a battle that will never end. Our second meme of the week is Time Hiccup, blue/red hybrid for an instant, reorder the stack at random. Dear God. Well, this card is fun. I'm not sure we've ever seen any sort of card that reorders the stack. I will say that probably would be a blue ability if we were to ever see it. And obviously, red likes to do things randomly. In fact, red likes to do a lot of things that blue likes to do randomly. That said, blue doesn't usually do things randomly on its own. In conjunction with red, it will often do it, but not usually just by itself. To that end, this probably couldn't be a true red-blue hybrid card because blue couldn't do this exact ability by itself. Red probably could, that is assuming we're suspending the disbelief that WotC would never print a card like this. Now, I'm not saying they haven't printed ridiculous cards in the past, but just not usually in this way. In addition, this effect is so powerful that it should probably be costed higher, 4 mana or something. That said, even at 1 mana, it's not a very good card because you don't get to choose how the stack is reordered, so it could be the exact same way, it could be in an even worse way than before, but even if an ability isn't beneficial, just by having the ability to do something powerful, it needs to be more expensive. And our third meme card for the week is Diamond Hands, white, snow, black for an artifact treasure. Treasures can't be sacrificed. At the beginning of your upkeep, for each treasure you control, create a token that's a copy of it. Now, flavor-wise, Diamond Hands means someone who is willing to keep their stocks for a very long time in order to increase their investment. Hence, not being able to sacrifice treasures. Now, at first glance, this gives you double your treasures each turn, right? If you have 3 treasure tokens, then you get 6 treasure tokens, and then 12 treasure tokens, etc. However, seeing as it is a treasure card as well, you actually copy it, which means then you will have the copying ability happening twice each turn, and then of course 4 times, and then 8 times. So this is absurd. Now, of course, you could use this with Revel in Riches, and you would win pretty quickly, just a few turns you'd have to wait. You could also use something that would destroy your Diamond Hands, not sacrifice them, in order to make it so that you can sacrifice the rest of your treasures to gain tons and tons of mana. Or you could just use something like an Urza, which allows you to turn them into mana, whether or not you sacrifice them. But the important thing to focus on is the fact that the mana cost stands for Wall Street bets. Number 5 for this week is Kulori Ascetic. 1 white for a 3/4 legendary creature monk avatar. He has vigilance, and creatures you control have protection from opponents with more cards in their hand than you. He also has discard a card, Kulori's controller draws a card, only opponents may activate this ability. First of all, I love abilities like this protection one that constantly fluctuate. It forces your opponents to play the game in a different way in order to negate this ability. They want to have fewer cards than you in order to make it so you don't have protection from them. And that might mean activating Kulori's ability to discard a card and make you draw a card, even if they generally wouldn't want to. Really cool design here, and I think a very nice mono-white commander. Number 4 this week is Ancient's End. 1 and a black for an instant. Exile target Elder, God, or Planeswalker, then scry 1. This is basically the Future is Now Old Man that we got a couple weeks ago, except good, or at least decent. It's a sideboard card to be sure, because if your opponent isn't playing any Elders, Gods, or Planeswalkers, then you're not going to have a target for this. But with all 3 of those together, you have quite a few targets to hit as opposed to just the 24 that I mentioned a couple weeks ago that you could hit if you only could target Elders. This makes it actually decent, and the Scry one makes it feel like it's actually worth putting in your sideboard for the off chance that you run across some of these cards, because you get a really cheap removal spell and a Scry on top of it. Number 3 for this week is the Imposter. 3 and a blue for a legendary Planeswalker with 3 loyalty. The Imposter is every Planeswalker type at all times. +1, create a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. -1, the Imposter gains all loyalty abilities of other Planeswalker cards on the battlefield and in graveyards until end of turn. You may activate another loyalty ability of it. Super sweet design here. So that static ability seems at first pretty irrelevant. It can trigger things like the Triumph cycle, which would be nice, but overall not super helpful. The +1 is okay. The -1 is the reason to have this guy. It's very similar to a Nicol Bolas Dragon God ability, where he takes all of the abilities of all Planeswalkers on the battlefield, except that this can also hit Planeswalkers in graveyards. It also costs an additional -1 to use the ability, so it makes it a little bit more fair, I guess, which is reasonable seeing as Nicol Bolas was 5 mana and 5 colored mana, and the Imposter is just a single blue. Overall, a really sweet design, creative, ingenuitive, etc. But in practice, I'm not sure it would work very well. You'd have to play like a Super Friends type deck, and then, yeah, it's nice that it has the abilities of all the Planeswalkers you have, plus the ones in your graveyards, but if you're playing a Super Friends type deck, you already have tons of different Planeswalkers to do different things. This also starts with relatively low loyalty, which I am okay with because I think Planeswalkers generally start with an absurd amount of loyalty, but it makes it so his -1 is even worse because it's really hard to actually get to activate something off of it that's going to be worth it. So cool design, but not super effective. Number 2 for this week is Unrepentant Thief. 1 and blue-black hybrid for a 1/2 creature elf rogue. Whenever you cast a spell you don't own, draw a card. This is a really cool synergy piece for cards like Gonti, Hostage Taker, or Thief of Sanity. Obviously, stealing your opponent's spells is already enough of a payoff that you don't need anything else to go with it, but if you can play a 2-drop that'll also draw you a card whenever you're doing that, that incentivizes you to make it a theme in your deck, and would just be a really cool combination. As far as Commander, there are only a couple that can really take advantage of this very well, with Jaleva or Rexiel being the 2 commanders I could find in the right colors that were able to cast spells at least once every turn, if not more often. It's a cool, simple design that fits really well in blue and black. Finally, our number 1 for this week is Diamond of Devotion, 0-cost artifact, which says, this spell costs 1 more to cast for each color in your commander's color identity, and tap, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. This is a well thought out design. In a colorless deck, you can cast it for 0 mana, but it literally taps for nothing because you don't have any colors in your commander's color identity. But that's okay because colorless decks already have tons of mana ramp anyway. In a monocolored deck, this would cost a single mana to be able to produce that 1 mana of your commander. This is where the card really shines because it's halfway between a Mox and like an Arcane Signet, just costing a single mana. This would quickly become a staple in every single monocolored deck, I believe. Then, if you're playing a 2-color deck, it's an Arcane Signet. It costs you 2 mana, and it taps for any color in your commander's color identity. So it's exactly an Arcane Signet, which means that in a 2-color deck, this also becomes a staple. Arcane Signet and this work basically identically. And then in a 3-color deck, it becomes 3 mana. It taps for any color still, but then it's just a really bad Arcane Signet, it's a bad Commander Sphere, it's a bad Chromatic Lantern, right? So at that point, it's basically unplayable. You can't play it in 3 colors, and obviously you can't then play it in 4 or 5. It's just terrible. But it's insane in 1 color, and it's just another really, really, really good card in 2 color. So I think that this card would be a bad decision to actually print from WotC, but that's the cool thing about custom cards. We can make cards that we don't actually even want printed by WotC because we're not WotC. So cool design, and I'd certainly play it. It's a good one. And those are all the cards we have to review for this week. I say this a lot, but I really do appreciate everybody who watches our videos, who comments, and everything like that. If you want to get feedback on custom cards that you've designed, please check out our Discord. There is a link in the description, and I know we would all love to see you there. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll have another community design review video for you next Tuesday.